Yes, thank you all for making the time this morning when we are discussing a topic that is, I think, quite popular today. Making digital work in Uganda is the topic of today's discussion. And the discussion is happening alongside a launch of a report authored by UNCDF around how they are applying a market systems development approach to building inclusive digital economies in Uganda. With me today, a couple of speakers from all sorts of, from various backgrounds. We have Mohammed Muaz Jalil is a market systems development expert. He's an approved auditor for market systems development programs and an accredited social value practitioner. He works across many countries, but specifically he's supporting UNCDF in trying to implement the market systems approach across various countries. Muaz will be giving us a brief sort of 101 about market systems development before we go into the depth of the subject. We have Chris, who is the digital country lead at UNCDF Uganda. We have Pamela Businge Tumichirize, who is the monitoring and results measurement manager at ABI Development. ABI is one of the institutions that are implementing the same market systems development approach in their program. They'll be telling us about the experience with that. We have Stella Lugalambi. She's the co-founder at Hamwe East Africa. Hamwe East Africa is a fintech, but that has, I think, has found a niche in agriculture. So they are very much involved in digitizing the agriculture value chain. They are currently a partner of UNCDF implementing a project in northern Uganda and West Nile. She'll be giving us her experience in implementing this approach as part of their business model. We have Colin Mugasha Wabirukamu, is the Director E-Government Services at NITA Uganda. NITA U is a big shot when it comes to digitization of Uganda. So we'll be hearing from him about how they are implementing projects and programs around digitization, but with systemic change in mind. We have Martha Olwenyi. She's the results measurement consultant at UNCDF, and a few other colleagues at UNCDF will also intervene. So without further ado, I'd like to have Muaz give us an intro about market systems development approach. And Muaz is based in Canada, so he's not with us live, but he shared a video which in my view will be audible and quite understandable. Over to Muaz. Audio, please.
Okay, sorry about that.
Thank you, Richard, for the introduction. Hello, everyone. My name is Muaz Jalil. Sorry, I could not be there physically, in virtual mode in real time because I'm based in Canada. It's 3 a.m. in the morning. Hopefully, this recording is useful. And so without further ado, let's continue presentation. Now, market systems approach is an approach to development, which focuses on sustainably changing the way market systems operate. Now, the definition of market systems is slightly broad. We are not talking about a physical market system, but it is a collection of actors, a rule-governed institution. It could be in digital space, like Amazon and others. So it's a broad definition of market system. So we want to sustainably change the market system so that it offers opportunities and benefit. To whom? To marginalized women, youth, foreign refugees, and immigrants, which is the target audience of UNCDF. So it would be different for your program or your organization, but in this case, that's the objective. So by ensuring inclusive growth and access, so market systems sustainably change by providing opportunities and benefit to this group, and they ensure growth and access through growth and access. So that's a broad definition of market systems development as it pertains to UNCDF. Now, it comes with a lot of other, MSD has a lot of different names. So sometimes some people call it making markets work for the poor, better for the poor, MM4P or M4P. It's called by some as inclusive market systems or market systems approach. Broadly, they're similar concept, but different organizations use them differently. And based on how you define MSD, there are roughly 80 to 150 programs across 40 to 15 countries following MSD approach or elements of MSD approach. Major donors beyond UNCDF are USAID, UK Aid, Swedish SIDA, DFAT, Australian, and the Swiss SDGs. I mean, there are other organizations who are following MSD approach, but these are the major donors, I would say, who are following MSD approach, right? And in different sectors, agriculture, vocational education, urban markets, etc. Now, moving on to explain how MSD differ from normal traditional approach. Let's say we differentiate between symptom-focused programs versus underlying concern-focused programs, or MSD approach. So in a symptom-focused programs, you basically ask the question, what problems do people, firms have, your target audience, and you try to solve them. So farmers don't have sufficient yield, give them good quality seed. People are not getting jobs, help them, train them, and help them get jobs. Whereas an underlying constraint focused MSD approach starts with the same question, symptom focused question: what problems do firms or people have, whoever your target audience are? But then asks a deeper question, which is why isn't their market environment providing a solution, right, to these problems? So when we want fuel efficient cars, Toyota and Teslas are coming up with that. When we want cheaper mobile phones, you have Huawei or other companies coming up with that, right? Or more powerful phones, we have Apple and others coming. So markets usually respond to our need or wants, right? Why isn't the same thing happening for our target audience? So you ask this deeper question: why isn't the market system working for the poor or youth, right? So that's the MSD, how it differentiates from you're not getting told. You ask these deeper questions, right? And no, obviously, I'm just taking 5 minutes to explain MSD. There are courses which take last 2 weeks, right? So it's going to be really focused explanation. So just to create more understanding, traditionally, these are common mistakes people make. Like MSD, it is not about perfect market. There is nothing called perfect market. There is no ideal version of the market that we're trying to reach, through our interventions. No, it's always context specific, right? And it's not about free market. That's the other mistake we make. We think that pure regulation, more private sector, more money, this is better. Not so true, especially if you're working in education, health, and other markets. Regulation, the role of government are pivotal, right? So it's not about free market, and therefore it's not about only private sector, right? And that there is no role for government. There is an absolute role for government and other organizations like PMOs, associations, NGOs, advocacy groups. They are all actors who play an important role for the well-functioning of a market, right? And regulated market at that, right? So there is option for subsidy. It's not about just private is good and public is bad. So market systems development approach focuses on facilitating a more effective and inclusive market system for the poor, which is based on an understanding. Because you need to understand the underlying constraint it requires, and that's where this present study that we're doing, the inception study that has been showcased, was the key. It's detailed and constraints in those sectors. So for that, you need to have a good, let's say, in-depth studies, right? So which is shaped by a picture on sustainability, like who will take it forward, right? And therefore, you have to have intervention. You're flexible. You are entrepreneurial. What kind of intervention would crowd in other market actors? Because you have this broader vision, right, of the sector. So you're guided by that picture. And so it's light touch, indirect, and facilitative in nature. That's the key thing. It's the programs, the development programs are doing facilitative and indirect in their approach rather than going heavy-handed with solutions, right? So that's the overall focus of MSD approach. You have a fruitful session after this with the study. Sorry I couldn't be there once again. Good luck with to everyone. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And that was a brief introduction about what MSD is. And for me, the takeaway is the understanding that if the demand and supply of a given service, be it public or private service, is not working properly for certain people, then there's a challenge in that market system. There's a challenge in that system of delivery of the service to the target people. And one of the questions here is, can digital help? What can digital do in that? So to take us a bit deeper into the discussion is Chris Lukolio, who heads the digital program at UNCDF Uganda. I'd like to invite him to take us a bit deeper into how they're trying to use this approach to get digital work for some of the market failures in various sectors. Over to you, Chris.
Thank you so much, Richard. And many thanks to you all colleagues who have joined us from different organizations. We really thank you for your time. If you, Richard, if you could share the slides, please. This, just to give you all some context here, that UNCDF is implementing a strategy on leaving no one behind in the digital era. And I wanted to explain why we are focusing very much on this market systems development approach. Because ultimately, resources are always limited. And we think that in order to be sustainable, in order to achieve sustainability in trying to ensure that indeed no one's left behind, we had to implement using an approach that would sort of serve to catalyze the market, that we would be able to use the resources that we have in order to encourage others to join in. And so as we discussed today, the idea will be to show you, the approach that we took, the in-depth studies that we did, and this report that we are launching today really takes you on that journey with us. Now, in this strategy, leaving no one behind in the digital era, we focus very much on partnerships. We partner with public sector and private sector, and you heard Muaz say that both public and private sectors are very important in a market systems development approach. The idea really is to unlock constraints. So you will hear us talk about when we did these in-depth studies, we went into these different markets and tried to understand, all right, why aren't people using digital services to access education, to access healthcare? What are those underlying constraints, okay? And when we identify those constraints, we dedicate resources to addressing those constraints so that once that constraint is removed, market actors, different market actors, public and private, can come in and continue to do the work that they do. And so that's the focus. And Rachel, if you can go back to the previous slide, the idea really is to try and unlock those market constraints and leverage innovation and technology in order to build this, this inclusive digital economy that helps us to achieve the SDGs, okay? So if you go to the next slide, please, I want to walk you all through the process that we undertook. And again, the idea here was to sort of get at, we could not address all the problems in the country. So we chose those sectors which affect large numbers of people. So all of us are affected by the education sector. The agricultural sector, it's the largest employer in the country. We looked at the health sector, all of us access healthcare in one way or another. So these sectors affect large numbers of people. But within those sectors, they are subsectors, they are market systems within these different sectors. And so we thought, all right, what are those market systems that affect the most vulnerable? Okay. And I give you an example. So a market system could be, in education, if you have a school, and a student, that right there, the transaction that happens constitutes a market system. Now there are rules that govern that system. There's tuition to be paid. There are laws that govern education and curricula. So there are rules. But indeed, what are the constraints? Why can't that student access education using technology, even in times of COVID? And so identifying the constraints, we then went into really map those out. And in a future slide, you will see just the large number of constraints that we uncovered. But once we prioritized those subsectors, what are the subsectors that are affecting mostly those people in danger of being left behind? We focused on those subsectors. And once we did that, we then tried to identify what are those constraints, okay? And in identifying those constraints, you sort of say, why? I am not able to access education. Why? Well, because there are no computers, even if it's time. These are times of COVID, and it would be good to access education using computer. Okay, so why can't you do that? Well, there is the costs of those are high, but also there's no internet. Why? So you kind of dig deeper until you get to the underlying cause. Okay, so we went through an in-depth market assessment doing exactly that. And with this diagnosis, we were able to develop the strategy that we followed. Okay, we then looked at, having identified the constraints, we then looked at, all right, what are the interventions that we can then use to address those constraints? And if you go to the next slide, I will sort of walk you through the process that we undertook in looking at those different constraints and the prioritization we did in order to arrive at the intervention that we undertook. Next slide, please. Okay, so as you can imagine, these are large sectors, as I mentioned. There were a large number of constraints that we identified. And in fact, we at the time did this study focusing on Northern Uganda and West Nile. So we didn't even look at the entire country, but actually looked at a subset. Although it's safe to say many of these constraints really track across the country. But in order to identify where should we focus our efforts, where should we focus our resources, we went through a prioritization exercise. We looked at relevance, all right? So as we looked at these subsectors and the constraints therein, how relevant are these constraints, are these subsectors to refugees, migrants, rural women, farmers, youth? These are the subsectors within our populations that are most likely in danger of being left behind, okay? So we looked at relevance to these different target groups. We also then looked at fit, all right? So we prioritized these subsectors based on consistency with national and governmental priorities, because you can't address one constraint when it's actually not even in the National Development Plan. That wouldn't work. So where is there fit, okay? And then we looked at feasibility. We looked at the resources that we have, but we also looked at, the policy environment, the resources within these markets, and we looked at what can we feasibly address in order to leverage digital technologies, digital service offerings, to address the constraints that people are facing in agriculture, in health, in education, in finance, in order to address those constraints. What is feasible, okay? So that funnel sort of gives you a sense of the process that we went through in order to take the large number of constraints that we had in order to kind of whittle them down to a set of priorities, okay? And this funneling process really yielded 6 subsectors prioritized across the different sectors that we'll be talking about, which is health, agriculture, and education, okay? So if you go to the next slide, please. This gives you a sense just of the large number of constraints. So if you go from the left-hand side of the screen, you start to see the various constraints that we identified. And as this prioritization process proceeded, we sort of started to shrink those. That's not to say that the constraints that we didn't take were not important. Remember, we wanted to look at which ones are affecting most the target audience that we looked at. Again, the people most in danger of being left behind: refugees, rural women, youth. And again, based on fit, what fits with national development priorities? What fits with current plans that we see? And of course, where is the feasibility? Can some of these constraints be addressed by digital service offerings, or can they not? And so this gives you a sense of how we came from a large number of constraints and kept reducing those to the final ones that we identified. What we hope is that you, the colleagues attending this session, and when you look at our report, that actually you will see some of these constraints, and we hope that others will take up the mantle and address some of these constraints that we as UNCDF or our partners could not address with our resources or our expertise, or that could not be addressed with digital service offerings, but might be addressed by other means, okay? And so with that, I hope you get a sense of the exercise that we went through, because what I will do next is to invite, well, before I do that, let's look at some of the results. So as we've gone through, so we launched this project, this program, we did an in-depth market assessment. We identified constraints that we would tackle. Out of those constraints, we identified interventions. So many of the programs that, or many of the projects that you now see us undertake are the interventions addressing those constraints. And as of the end of last year, we were actually starting to see these results as you can see on your screen. So a rise in active customers, all right? People who are signing up for services, digital products and services. And we've disaggregated that by gender, of course. So number of active customers, number of customers who have registered. Of course, you have several people register, but many times, many of those are not active. How many of those are looking at improved digital products and services? We also looked at several digital service offerings, which were new models that were not in the market before, but are now available in the market. So the idea, once again, is to sort of create systemic change. And we, by doing this, were able to empower others to follow our lead and do the same. We also, I think at this juncture, let me invite my colleague, Stephen, to walk you through what these interventions look like in the agriculture sector. What was the experience there, and what did we learn? So over to you, Stephen, and thank you all colleagues so much.
Yeah, so thank you, Chris. Yeah, so I'll just be taking you through the agriculture sector, and specifically, I'll be talking about the broader constraint of production and marketing that was some of the underlying constraints that we did zero down to. But within the production and marketing, because we are deploying digital technologies to kind of act as a catalyst to unlock that constraint, we found out that the underlying constraint there that was really around how do you come up with initiatives that try to unlock constraints around digital infrastructure and connectivity. So that gave us a thinking around creating what we call a last mile distribution network of digital community entrepreneurs. And these ideally are opinion leaders or lead farmers or village agents. You can call them change agents within parish and village level. We've been able to build their capacity to help us act as last mile distribution channel partners that help us to accelerate access to mobile phones, access to solar for lighting and solar for charging, access to better connectivity through the mobile networks and having better mobile money agents, access to issues around financial literacy and digital literacy. So ideally, we've created a network of change agents who are the digital community entrepreneurs. We've built their capacity to help us to accelerate last mile distribution of digital inclusion related services to the last mile. Now, because we've been able to do that, that kind of helps us to kind of open up and create a springboard that actually helps us to accelerate and promote digital innovative solutions that leverage different innovative solutions that are really sustainable in nature. Now, to really tackle the issue of production and marketing, A good example is we are using the digital community entrepreneur as a bridge to kind of accelerate and promote digital traceability among the last mile, where we're able to have visibility of the entire value chain. We're also using the same digital community entrepreneur as a channel to extend extension services and agro-advisory services to the last mile. And lastly, we're also using the same group of digital community entrepreneurs to sensitize the farmers about access to credit, and also to leverage different data that we collect through farmer profiling to be able to reach and also come up with a scorecard, which eventually helps us to be able to lend to these farmers. So ideally, in short, what we have done is, one, we've opened up doors to reach the last mile using the digital community entrepreneurs, and we are now beginning to plug in different innovative, sustainable models that help to address issues around access to markets, issues around access to information, access to extension and advisory services, access to better records management throughout the value chain, and etc. So that is a clear example of what we have actually done. And this actually is picked from the in-depth assessment that we did in the inception study, and it's actually shaping very well and helping us to see perfect the implementation at the end of the day. Thank you, Chris. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Stephen. And so, colleagues, this is just one example. Our hope is that others will see this and invest more, or have competing business models. The idea, again, is to catalyze the market. Let me also have another colleague working in the health and education sector to also give us examples from that. So over to you, Julio, with examples from health and education.
Thank you, Chris, and good morning, everyone. Please allow me to share the journey. I'm not going to focus on what we are doing in the different projects, but let me just share with you our journey from the constraint identification to what we are currently doing with the different projects now. So at the end, I'll just give an example of an early sign of impact from MSD at the project level in the health sector, and then at the stakeholder level in education. In the health sector, we all know that the health sector consists of private and public sector actors. However, in rural areas, public health facilities are closer to the community, and the Ministry of Health manages, supports, and coordinates every aspect of the sector. Also, in the communities in Uganda, VHT, which are community health volunteers, works at the community level to provide primary health care. They are at the forefront of the health system in Uganda. So the Inception study reports or findings informed us of the underlying constraints in the sector, but some of them could not be addressed using digital solution. But also, nothing was new, but just a confirmation of what we knew in the ecosystem. However, after multiple engagements with key market actors, we came in the creation of what we are calling area of focus that led to the creation of projects. So in the healthcare, we have two areas of focus to address two constraints. The first constraint is the lack of motivation, performance, and quality of service by VHT. That led to the creation of the digitization of the government VHT model in partnership with BRAC and MEDIC and the Ministry of Health. So the second constraint is frequent drug stock out at facility level. That led to the creation of the digitization of stock of drugs and medical supply at the lowest health facility, and these are health facility number 2 and number 3. So the implementation of these two projects follows a strict MSD approach, and tools such as theory of change, reflection session, and the theory of change to guide the implementation stages during the implementation, the reflection session to identify market dynamics, as well as project deviation, and also result measurement and other tools. Let me give you an example in health of an early sign of impact from the MSD. So due to the MSD approach working and involving different stakeholders, the ministry and the Health Information, Innovation and Research Technical Working Group recently selected the project and tool as a reference to inform the digitization of VHT of the government model. This is just an early sign that shows that every time you're putting stakeholders together to address a common challenge, impact can be shown. In the education sector, next slide, please. So in the education sector, we all know that the education sector in Uganda shares similarity with the health sector. So we have public school that serves most of the rural areas, and the Ministry of Education and Sport is in charge to manage, regulate, support, and coordinate activities in the sector. So UNCDF approach in the education sector is a 360-degree approach to digitization, focusing on both private and public sector on one side, and on the other side, we have the demand and supply, the demand and supply. So the constraint that we're trying to solve here, so in the inception findings, again, things were not new in this sector. It was just a confirmation of what we knew in the ecosystem. So we identified 4 constraints that can be addressed or alleviated during using digital solutions, and we've created 4 projects. I'm just going to highlight those 4 projects and directly dive into the early signs of impact for at the stakeholder level. So the 4 projects that we've created is the digitization of school fee payment, savings and loan, plus school management solution, which is more a private sector model to address the access to finance in education. So the other project is the digitization of recruitment of teachers, which is more a public sector approach to address the issue of availability of quality teachers. And the other one is the digitization of CTAP through CPD to improve the skills of teachers through continuity of education. And you can see clearly that the alignment of all the 3 projects with the high needs of digitization during this pandemic time. So an early sign of impact is at the stakeholder level in the education sector. UNCDF joined the EDP, which is the Education Development Partner, which is the forum that groups all the development sector partners in Uganda that supports the education sector. And this includes the UN agencies, the World Bank, the African Development Bank, different embassies, USAID, CEDA, and so on. So recently, we actually created a subcommittee to focus on the digitization and technology for education. And these subcommittees co-chaired by UNESCO, UNCDF, and INABEL. So
Julio,
this platform allows
to summarize, thanks.
Yes, I'm wrapping up, thank you. So this platform allows to streamline investment from different stakeholders toward the education digital agenda, but also to support the ministry strategically and involve different key market players such as innovators, academicians, investors, donors onto one table to address the common goal. To wrap up, it's really crucial to involve everyone, including policymakers, developers, innovators, academicians, to make sure that we are triggering partnerships, collaboration, and co-creation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Julio. And I'll now hand over to Richard to take us through our fireside chat. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you so much, Chris and colleagues, for that elaborate sharing of what UNCDF is doing. So for me, really, some of the things that stand out as risks as we do what we do is, and this applies to most of us and some of the people on the call, and hopefully the fireside chat could dig deeper into that, is when we do what we do, are we really tackling the core problem or we are tackling symptoms? And when we implement digital solutions, are we just throwing a digital solution in there, or does it actually help to tackle the core problem and all its ramifications? And if it can't, is it worth implementing? So we are getting into our fireside chat. If you can keep the screen on, please. And to kick us off, I'd like to invite ABI Development, Pamela Tumwebaze is Monitoring and Results Measurement Manager at ABI. She's going to share with us her journey or their journey at ABI in trying to implement a market systems development approach in the fields where they operate. So over to you, Pamela.
Thank you very much, Richard. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are.
I'd like
please
to
share with us your
share a screen.
Yes, please.
And I just want to say that I am Pamela Tumwichirize, not Tumwebaze.
I'm very sorry for that.
It's okay.
Tumwichirize.
So I'll speak through this presentation, and I am called Pamela Tumwichirize, like the moderator has said. I'll just take us through the market and systems development success story at ABI. ABI is the Agricultural Business Initiative founded in 2010 by Government of Uganda and Denmark to promote private sector agribusiness development. It's a multi-donor funded organization, and some of these funders are CEDA, USAID, EU, and Danida. ABI comprises of ABI Development and ABI Finance. ABI Development provides development support, provides development support, development finance as matching grants and business development services through business development services that will support the agribusinesses and the agricultural producers. And this is targeted to 7 subsectors, 7 value chains, which are coffee, pulses, cereals. We have dairy, we have horticulture, we have oil seeds, and the latest one being poultry. Whereas ABI Finance supports financial institutions through matching grants and also provides lines of credit to financial institutions for on lending to the agricultural businesses, and also has an agricultural loan guarantee scheme. ABI, I'll call it ABI, shorten it, subscribes to the donor committee for enterprise development standard for monitoring our results and measuring the impact in the private sector. It also monitors and measures its intervention progress towards sustainability and scale. So having been around for more than 10 years, a systemic change study was conducted early this year to check whether there are any signs of systemic impact happening as a result of ABI interventions. Study conclusions found some evidence of change introduced by ABI that went beyond the intervention into the wider market systems, and this could be considered as systemic. An example will be shared later from the financial services development. We found that also Tier 4 financial institutions registered impressive growth in membership portfolio size since the start of the ABI partnership. ABI partners also expressed satisfaction with the products and services they have been able to receive and interact with over time. SACCOs have been able to go an extra mile to add additional branches on their own, using their own resources. They've upgraded their MIS to allow mobile banking and agent banking. All these efforts have in turn generated interest and investment from the private sector players, Government of Uganda, in particular the Agriculture Insurance Consortium that is promoting the agriculture insurance among our farmers, and other development partners like the Embassy of the Netherlands, working together with SNB to support the dairy sector in southwestern Uganda. And all this crowding in, we believe, is building on ideas that were promoted by ABI. Just to take you through an example, like I mentioned earlier, I'd like to share with you an example that we have partnered with UCAFS. UCAFS is Uganda Central Cooperative Financial Services. This is a relationship that we have had for quite a long time, way back in 2013, when we're just having institutional organization support. And over time, this UCAFS, which is an apex body for all SACCOs, has had a number of projects, and the latest one that ended last year was the DIFCO project. DIFCO stands for Digital Financing Among the Cooperatives project. The activities were to automate 201 SACCOs with a project kit of a computer, a solar system, and an accounting software. So the SACCOs that actually subscribed to this project were able to be connected to mobile banking platforms such as mSACCO and mSave to allow members transact on their mobile phones. Some successes registered with UCAFS. 197 units were automated. The generated reports were easily received, and there was timely data received at the apex body. We see enhanced inter-branch network, convenience of members due to remote transacting. We also see enhanced women participation because of the remote transactions. And here, particularly those ones that have prohibitive husbands, they've been able to transact comfortably in their homes, make their savings, and be able to get some small loans from the SACCOs. Supervision was remotely done by the SACCO managers. There was more communication with the members, which was eased using the SMS platforms. Calling for AGMs was no longer a thing of the vehicle running around the village and making noise. It was about an SMS message. We see an increase in the youth embracing the ICT and being part of a SACCO membership. We also see SACCOs, we also got to see that SACCOs and UCAFS, call it UCAFS, were able to enhance revenue from the digital platforms through the transactions being made. And we also see that more SACCOs are attracted to crowd into the project. Challenges, we anticipated that usually the projects are 2 to 3 years, but there was a lot of time taken to embrace the automation idea, so that needed more time with the project that was at hand. Staff were computer illiterate and needed frequent training. There was also phobia realized among the beneficiaries. Whenever they made a transaction on their phones, they would literally run back to the banks to make sure that this transaction was actually registered. So this needed a lot of sensitization and awareness to ensure the uptake is achieved. Some lessons learned, subscribed members were more resilient during the COVID-19 lockdown as business continued virtually. Those that were not subscribed, we see SACCOs that have actually closed shop and are not in business anymore. The regulatory environment favors UCAFS to approach the SACCOs without restriction. And we also see more SACCOs calling us to join, be able to join and have them on board so that they can embrace the change. I leave you that picture showing how the UCAFS agent is training these farmers in the mSACCO platforms. This was in Kakumiro. Thank you very much. That's my presentation. Over to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pamela, for sharing the experience of ABI. And again, what sort of stands out for me is you talked of something called crowding in. So yes, we all implement projects, but the extra mile is, are you crowding in the rest of the players? And that's what brings about systemic change. So maybe when you get the chance later during the Q&A, you'll give us a bit more of examples of how you've seen other players being crowded in, how you've seen other aspects of that market of financial services in rural areas sort of follow in the example that you gave through the project you're implementing. Another is what you mentioned around the time it takes for systemic change to trickle in. So it's one thing to implement a project, say I've digitized 100 people, but if you really want systemic change to trickle in, it will take a while because you're tackling not just your direct beneficiaries, but all the other ramifications around that specific market. So thanks a lot, Pamela, for that presentation. I'd like to bring in a public sector aspect. And we have Colin. Colin, NITA-EU is really at the forefront of e-government, digital transformation of our economy. And much as that is a trendy thing, but it is something that is very prone to, I would say, distortion in how things are implemented, the haphazard way in implementing digital transformation. And NITA-EU seems to be at the center of this. And in our terms, you're actually sort of the ones driving the systemic change in government, but also in the digitization of the rest of the economy. So share with us a bit about how you're actually holding that and making sure that we are systemically transforming through digitization. Over to you, Colin.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Richard, much appreciated. And thank you to everybody who's made time to participate. And UNCDF, of course, for the partnership. What's very clear from the public sector and the government and NITA is that we cannot do this alone. We cannot walk this digital acceleration journey and transformation journey alone. So partners and innovative private sector is extremely key. Richard, you raise some pretty good points there, and let me just remove my video just to maximize my network. I think you raised very pertinent points around where we are going. And as NITA, let me just say that we are committed to transforming lives through e-service delivery. So this is a very pertinent conversation in what we do and what we are built and what we are mandated to do. And NITA is also, obviously, you might know, but it's also a regulator, but also in charge of planning, advisory, coordination, promotion, and even implementing functions in the ICT sector. So therefore, providing this enabling digital environment is extremely key for us. Indeed, we've had quite a journey in digitization of service delivery, for instance, to the people. And I'll just speak through maybe 1, 2, 3 points with a few minutes that we have. I think Chris did mention the NDP3, and NITA is actually mandated to take literally about 80% in the next 3 years or so of our citizens online to access services. And how are we going to do that? How are we going to allow and provide access to services? It means there must be systemic change within the government itself, within the way we do business, within the way we operate as government. And you will notice that as NITA, we've been trying to push a one government approach. And what we are saying is that government needs to now look at service delivery from one approach, and even from a digital first approach. Can we go online? Can we reduce the queues at government offices? Can we ensure there's no duplication of government services? Can we ease the way business is done by our citizens? Can we improve more transparency and convenience? And this takes regulation. This takes bringing people together. And one of the strategies that we've done as NITA is really to get the MDS to think digital now. You've been doing the physical, and you've been doing that for a number of years, but now you've got to shift your strategy to a digital approach. You've seen many websites go up. More than 400 government websites have been built by NITA. But we're saying it's not enough to have just an information website. You've now got to shift into a transaction portal, but even further on to, you know, transformation portal, and not just an interactive portal, to serve the people through e-services. And therefore, we've had some rationalization also done within the government of services. We're saying, let's build this system once, and then let the whole government use it as a sustainable model. And that actually brings, you know, some order to the way things are being done. It's a journey, it's a long journey, but we have begun to make those steps. We're saying, let's not duplicate, you know, data centers and server spaces and standard. Let's build it once as NITA, and let's have it shared out through government services. So now we've got a centralized data center and government cloud system for which we're running more than, you know, 160 government applications out of a centralized data center. Again, that's sustainable, but that's bringing order to what was really isolated. We have also been recently building, and we're about to launch, an integration platform. And that means that many siloed government systems, as you can imagine, I think some of you know, you go to passport office, they'll ask for your biometric details. You will go to URSB for a business application. They want to know who you are again. You'll go to NIRA, they want to know who you are again. You go to URA, they're asking who you are again. And we're saying, no, we've got NIRA that is in charge of identity. If we integrate NIRA with all other government services and institutions, then there's no duplication. Again, that brings order to service delivery. But briefly, we've also built, of course, as part of our contribution to the digitization, we've built more than 4,000 kilometers of fiber optic cable around the country, and that's going to go up to about 6,000 to 7,000 the next 3 years. Again, that should accelerate e-service delivery that will change lives at the last mile. Let me just maybe give 2 examples, and I'll close out. I'm sure we'll have more time in the Q&A. For instance, in terms of providing a positive impact for our citizens, we've seen MDS change the way they're doing things. For instance, the Minister of Agriculture, we worked and partnered with them in using also another UN partner with what we call an e-voucher system. And Minister of Agriculture is basically aims at raising on-farm productivity in agriculture, you know, production, you know, marketable surplus of maize, beans, rice, cassava, you know, in more than 12 potential clusters. And basically the subsidy that the government and these partners are providing is through an electronic voucher, you know, through mobile. And this is going to affect, and is already affecting, you know, more than 280,000 families that are using agriculture, but targeted to even more than 500,000 families in more than 57 districts. So we're basically seeing a marketplace, a digital marketplace being created for agro dealers and for farmers using digital platforms and payments. And that has really shifted the discussion within the way MDS see digital delivery. We have seen, for instance, in the education space, we're doing another project, again with another UN partner called Colibri, where basically we're scaling up the implementation of an e-learning platform in over 30 schools. And recently we did something in Karamoja with about 5 schools rolling out the same. And we began to see what government labs that were doing nothing, government computer labs now, have the ability to deliver learning, you know, and improve learning outcomes, enhance digital and life skills of adolescents, especially girls, through digital learning platforms like Colibri. So basically, we're seeing government now shift its focus into using digital delivery. And maybe lastly, to say, we've also had lots of shared applications, you know, just for sustainability in terms of the way we're doing business. We have seen now a part of the national backbone, the national data center. We're seeing one application being built and being used by throughout the government for human capital, electronic government, procurement, we're shifting people from using Yahoo and Gmails and all sorts of personal collaboration into a unified government collaboration system. Again, this is one way of having sustainable, shared, but systemic change happening within the government. So I think that would be my quick thoughts right now around the education, agriculture, but the way we want to deliver government services. And we are cognizant that we cannot do this alone, Richard. We're cognizant that NITA cannot work alone, and therefore, partners partners like you, development partners and market actors and innovative private sector would really be the right ecosystem to move forward. So over to you, Richard, and we look forward to further partnership.
Yes, thanks a lot, Colin. And indeed, partnerships are really key. But again, when you have many people in the kitchen, sometimes there is need for order. Otherwise, you'll have the challenges that NITA-U is trying to solve now, which are challenges of siloed systems being implemented here and there. But we're saying, no, we need an integrated system for us to really see impact. If things are to be sustainable, we really need to work together in one direction and everybody adding to that. If we need to achieve impact, then we need to reach scale, and hence the need to sort of go in the same direction if we want to change lives. So thanks a lot, Colin, and appreciated what NITA is trying to do. I'd like to give the chance to Hamwe to quickly tell us about what they are doing. And I know they have a business model, they're a business out there, but we are here talking about market systems development. What does it mean to them? How has it changed how they look at implementing their things? Well, their things meaning their business model. How do they look at sustainability, impact, and systemic change as they do what they do? And after that, we'll quickly go into Q&A. I know there are questions that are coming up online. If you have questions, please put them in the chat. We might not have a lot of time for everybody to speak, but at least when questions are there, we'll be able to tackle them. So over to you, Stella, and be brief, please, so that we can open up the discussion. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody, and thanks, Richard, for Africa is agri-fintech. We like to coin a number of words to explain who we are. We went into a partnership to digitize the agriculture value chain starting from the farmer onwards up to the processor, the off-taker. And our platform basically was to help get farmer records, profile the farmer production, profile the different aspects. Now, since 2020, Hamwe has been partnering went into partnership intern that we had built for a few years. Basically, the system we built, we took it down to the ground. We reached, when we reached down there, we found that there were issues that we needed to address that would help the change. We got to work with the farmers, and we got to reach, sorry, I'm having a problem with my connection. Thank you. So we built a system that we started using with cooperatives. And when we reached down there, we found out that most of the cooperatives don't have IT infrastructure. They didn't have farmer records. They didn't have availability to inputs. They were too far. They were in rural settings where they couldn't even access financial systems, financial services, and everything. So since 2020, we went out there and we started implementing. I'm so sorry, I'm having an issue with the system here. Okay.
Yes, Stella. Better now?
Yes, I'm back. Yes, it's
Okay.
better now. I'm trying to get in. Yeah.
Please go ahead.
So with yeah. So we built a system called MyCop. While MyCop was actually built to help the agriculture value whatever's businesses, we established a beneficial market linkage in smallholders. We started working with partnerships. We got cooperatives, VSLAs, processors, aggregators, input suppliers, and agro dealers to work, and also retail farmers to work with us. We realized that the farmers wouldn't use the system as good as because they needed more information, they needed education. So we trained the young farmers in the different communities that actually had knowledge or had equipment like a phone or a laptop so that they can go back and talk to the farmers themselves. And so these digital agents did help us, and in about 4 to 5 months, they had actually profiled over 48,000 farmers onto the platform. They had actually gotten farmers to order for inputs on the platform. They had actually also gotten farmers to start using the system and also try to get credit on the system. Our primary market access revealed that farmers were willing to purchase and apply the recommended farm inputs if they were assured of the market. So by establishing the strategic partnerships with aggregators and processors, we were able to enable farmers to sell through their produce before they could even invest. By collecting real-time data from farmers and about the land size, the seeds that they're using, the fertilizer, the herbicides that they needed, the system was able to predict the expected yield for each of the farmers, and also facilitate the off-takers in booking farm produce and committed farmers. Currently, we found out that we needed over 7,000 trampolines that we are dealing with. We've gotten a supplier from Kampala who is actually supposed to be transporting it back to the areas we're in the Lango sub-region and the Acholi sub-region right now. We also found out that the availability of some of things like sacks were also not accessible down there, and yet in Kampala these sacks were going for 4,000 shillings. So we actually talked to a partner who is willing to supply them at 8,000. But all this was done by having the digital agents that had actually created the market. They go out there, they tell the farmers, look here, you don't have to put this on the ground. You can use a sack, and when you use a sack, your produce will have better market because the quality will be good. And so the farmers have actually taken on to this. And so we have actually gotten right now, because they are harvesting right now in northern Uganda, and we got about 15,000 sack orders from the farmers. So basically, this is some of the impact that we saw when we started profiling. Now we also have, with having all the economic identities for the farmers now on our platform, we've also had access to some financial services. Services have tried to come up with the sort of tweaked solutions for these farmers. We have up to 3,000 of these farmers have now been able to access credit through one of our financial partners, and they've gotten credit for the phones. They have also gotten credit there's a herbicide they use for post-harvest handling, and it goes between, they have gotten credit between $50 to $300, which was not the case before, because this kind of financial support was not available to them because of the little amounts that they request, and also because they didn't have any records. So the records that we created for them, the profiles, the farming records, have enabled them acquire these services. And secondly, it has also given them economic identities for them to be able to have statements and also join groups that can actually, saving groups like SACCOs that can help them access the funds through our platform. In a short while, we have also created what we call a hybrid business model where we earn commissions, transaction fees, and services access through our system. And this is not only for Hamwe, also the cooperatives and the digital agents are benefiting from this. For example, like I told you, a sack goes for 5,000 in Kampala, and when it's transported back, we could sell it. We're selling it at 7,000, and the cooperative gets 2% of this. The digital agent gets 2% of this, and Hamwe does also get money, and it all covers even the transaction cost. And usually, when you go up, and these bags have been going for 15,000, but even if they were going for 15,000 or 10 to 15,000, they were not easily available to the farmer. And so the farmer was not able to access them. So secondly, when you look at the trampolines, for example, one of those trampolines, 2% of on a trampoline sale, because we have purchased it at a cheaper cost in Kampala, the agent is making about 2,100 shillings. And one of the agents actually has managed to make about 2 million shillings from the trampoline sales. And the cooperatives make a combined money that before they didn't actually have. So our business model has become, as we start looking at in just 1 year, we're looking at the cooperatives actually benefiting and making some little income by serving the farmers in their group. There's a lot also of untapped potential in agri-tech category. And because most of these places haven't been reached, we've traveled to areas where we get there and everybody is saying, I would actually want to have a phone, but this guy here who sells phones in our town actually just has like 6. So by the next time he gets them, how will I get these phones in here? So we've talked to the shopkeepers, small agro dealers in areas to be actual suppliers. And that's how we have tried to crowd in other people. We've gotten them to be suppliers. So we get a major distributor to supply, to give them credit on stock so that they are able to supply their communities, and they are all crowded into the system and basically also benefit from it. We would say we would be cutting out some people of the market, but we've also tried to incorporate people. When we reached the villages, they had a problem of middlemen. So what Hamwe has done is to incorporate middlemen as aggregators, and we have built for them a platform where instead of them hustling and trying to get crop as much as possible, by having improved yields, there's enough women actually having a profile database of the farmers that can supply them and farms at a cost, and always trying to fight for this produce. So we have now like about 15 middlemen that have actually decided, I don't know whether we are telling them that they are becoming good, but they have decided to profile, to deal with bulk, to deal with a system and have a profile database of suppliers so that they don't have to fidget, and these farmers are very sure that they will buy from them, also have some sort of contract and offer them something in return. For example, if you're a middleman and you know very well that you're going to be needing soybean these many tons, why not bring the seed, and then we work backwards. You give them a credit and then your own seed, and then you're able to buy back without having competition. And as long as the produce is actually doubled or tripled because of proper seed, there is enough to go around, and you don't have to actually hustle with that. So basically, I'm saying that we have actually tried to incorporate and not cut out people. We have incorporated banks into the system. And the majority of them are actually seeing that agriculture is no longer a risky business. I don't know whether that I should mention some of them, but they're looking at it as actually a beneficial business, because with the harmware traceability system, you have a location of the farm, the location of the farmer, you know what he's producing before he actually produces it. And because you have also participated in giving him credit on fertilizer, you're very sure that the crop yield will be enough to actually pay your credit. Thank you very much. And I'm sorry for my stuttering at the beginning. I think I had jitters. Thank you. Bye.
No, Stella, you've been great, and thanks a lot for sharing. So really, the story of Hamway is one where Hamway really has gotten to adapt to the reality that being a fintech and bringing payments is not necessarily what the farmer wants, but really looking at everything that surrounds the farmer and being able to bring it together to work for the farmer. She's talked about how they've brought on board banks, agro-dealers, have incorporated middlemen, co-ops, and using the farmers themselves as agents in trying to bring, so across the entire value chain, to try to bring them together, leveraging a digital platform and be able to deliver to them inputs, funds, payments, credit, and even they are linking them to their circles and VSLAs, which is again the same spirit of looking at the system as opposed to delivering a portion of the system and hoping that you've solved the challenge. So thanks a lot, Stella, and hopefully we'll get a bit into details on that. I'd like us to get into some of the questions that have been posed, and I'll bring in my colleague Martha here. So Martha is a colleague at UNCDF, but her role, we like calling her the police, the police person at UNCDF, because she's in charge of making sure we are delivering the impact that we claim to be delivering. And the questions that came through, I think she's best placed to answer them. And they're about, how do you tackle issues of access to digital for the ordinary Ugandan? Is it really feasible to say you're delivering through digital? Are you being true to yourselves? How do you tackle challenges of illiteracy? And broadly, Martha, just talk about how we take care of such challenges and still reach the impact that we claim to be able to deliver, and how MSD, from where you sit on the monitoring, evaluation, and learning, how you ensure that all this is taken into account to be able to deliver impact. Martha.
Thank you so much, Richard, and the members. I hope you're able to hear me. I'm not going to be able to share my video. Maybe just
please go ahead.
1 second. That's how I look like, and I'm not a policewoman, just like Richard said, I think. So one is that at UNCDF, we have been able to try as much as possible to abide by the tenets of MSD, if I may say. And from the very first one, tackling impact to address the issues of digital challenges. One is that through this impact, the inception study, we were able to understand the constraints, and from understanding the constraints, UNCDF as a team came up with their theory of change. So development of the different tools which show the pathways of change, which we anticipate to contribute in the market system. And this helped us to identify what are the different changes that we want to create or contribute towards in the market, and for who. And for who here basically tries to identify the clients that these changes are expected to be, the clients who are expected to realize some of these changes, so that ultimately we are able to measure the systemic change and also the impact in the market. And answering the same question, and for who, we basically look at another aspect of market system development, which is around the actors, to understand which actors do we need to work with in the market. And I was glad when Nita, you talked about engaging with the different actors. Currently, UNCDF works with different partners, implementing partners, and these implementing partners take on different legs and arms of the constraints in the health, education, agriculture, and digital at large, to just make sure that we have the right partners on board as implementing partners, but we have the right partners on board even from the public sector, to just ensure that that loop is closed. And at the end of the day, we have different stakeholders who are able to take on the challenge, but also contribute towards addressing some of these issues. And earlier on, colleagues were talking of the digital extension agents who are basically actors at the lower level. People have talked about the Minister of Education. Nita Yu is here. The Hamway as an implementing partner, who are developers of different solutions. But some of these actors actually help to actually cement the different in addressing the different needs. And then as these actors help to contribute towards the anticipated impact of systemic changes in the market, we are using a sustainability lens. And this sustainability lens allows the actors, the partners, to think about what is the most appropriate business model that is being used or that we can use, so that ultimately there's a profitability angle. Ultimately, there is a better delivery model. Ultimately, there is a parameter of success, which we shall all agree to, that we have been successful both for the public and the other sectors. But ultimately, there is additionality in terms of forward looking at, if this ends, what next? And this is where, for example, in the public sector, we see different ministries, departments, and agencies we work with, thinking of, if this solution is piloted, we need to budget for it as a sustainability measure to keep it running. We see different partners adding different products to the current solution to just make sure that they embed the different features, which can continuously act as revenue buckets, which help to ensure that the engine is running, and everyone on the different posts or different stations or different locations as an actor are seeing the benefit, which allows them to be loyal, but which allows them to see the viability and be able to deliver successfully with or without the grant or the support, because that is what we call the realization of addressing market constraints using collective partners who agree on a particular impact and also who agree on a particular business model. So UNCDF particularly has actually used all these lenses to try and come up with different result chains. At UNCDF, each of the partners or each of the projects have different result chains, and these different result chains help us to measure, to actually articulate the cause and effect relationship.
Yes,
around.
Martha, I think we are losing you there, but I also think you've really made the point, and I'll request we move to Martha. If you allow, you can come in a bit later to continue that point. Question for you, Colin, about what you submitted. The question is, you talked about creating an integrated system away from Gmails and Yahoo. And given that you are a government authority, the question is, how are you going to protect or ensure privacy of people's data from government interference and selling the data to different fora? Colin, you'd like to talk about that?
Yeah, thank you. And I hope you can hear me. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Henry. Just to clarify again, obviously, first of all, NITA's role is also to superintend and oversee data privacy and confidentiality. So that's really our docket. And what I meant was really not an integrated systems using Gmail or Yahoo. I was saying we actually want to walk away from private emails like Gmails and Yahoo, which government officers have been using. And in actually, In actual sense, some are still using it for government business, but we've now built a shared service. As I mentioned, we wanted to have a build once and use many approach, or a cost-saving centralized system. And we built a system called the Unified Messaging and Collaboration System. And what that does is that it's really built on government domains. So you should see nita.go.ug. So it's based on the go.ug domain nomenclature, rather than your yahoo.com, gmail.com, where I know you're thinking the risks could be. So really, it's actually the reverse. We're trying to move away from private email usage to actually government email usage and domain usage. This system obviously goes way beyond email. It also allows internal collaboration, scheduling of meetings. It does video conferencing. It does document management and workflows. But suffice it to say that our point is to walk away from using private mailboxes for that email context that you mentioned, to actually going to secure government domain usage. So just to clarify, Henry, that's actually the reverse. We're trying to make sure we have a more secure, locally hosted. We host this locally, so we're in control of it. And our idea is to ensure government, privacy of our government data. So I hope that helps, Henry.
Yeah, and Colin, maybe quickly, would you touch upon the new Data Protection and Privacy Act and what you're trying to do around that?
Yeah. So obviously we are partnering with, we've actually created, first of all, a new directorate just for that. And it's focused on literally a new mini organization within NITA to actually oversee this. And a number of acts have also been put. So we have a regulatory framework now that allows this sort of confidentiality to happen. And we've been targeting heavily, there has not been any enforcement of people's private, personal, individual data being protected. Now we'll have an opportunity where, even citizens can report, citizens can give access to their own information. And one of the greatest ways we've done actually is say thank you to UNCDF. We're actually working on a portal together right now that should be going into service very soon for the citizens. And basically, citizens can now access information purely on this data privacy, understand more about their rights in this area. But we also want to protect people's data by overseeing all those data producers in government and those people who are sharing data. Can that be done in a legal manner? And also citizens now can actually provide access, legally provide access and permission to using of their individual data through a centralized portal or centralized forum. And so we've got some progress right now in this regard. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Colin. And we're inviting more questions in the chat. If you can put your questions there, they'll be answered. I'd like to turn to Pamela on something that we talked about when you are presenting, which is the whole thing of crowding in. So Pamela, just talk to a person or an institution that they're implementing a project. The project is not big enough to be able to tackle all the constraints in a given market, in a given system. And you could give the example in financial services. But how would you say they embark on such a project to be able to crowd in other people that are players in that same system? It's like that even without the clout to be able to change the system alone, you're actually able to work with others to ensure that you sort of catalyze change in the system. What's been your experience there as a BI development? Pamela, you there?
Yes, I am here. Thank you very much, moderator, for the question. To talk about crowding in, I'll just give an example. I would like to, for instance, in the dairy sector, we've been working with a number of financial institutions in southwestern Uganda. And you find that these financial institutions have come up with different dairy products. So in that sense, these different dairy products have also attracted other development partners that are coming in to support the different actors. For instance, they encourage partnership with those financial institutions, have systems in place so that they can be able to meet the client's needs. We have an institution where they have been able to develop new products based on dairy, and we see more farmers that are in the dairy sector coming in to take up these loans and be able to enhance their farms, because they're sure that they'll be able to sell their milk through the milk collection centers that have been established and are still maintained. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thanks a lot, Pamela. Colin seems to be very popular, and I guess rightly so here. There's a question from Joyce for you, Colin, and it says, how is NITA ensuring the involvement of Ugandans, not just in the utilization, but in the development of local solutions? We recently saw government struggle to identify vulnerable people that were eligible for cash handouts. How is NITA and other government agencies going to integrate citizens into a national database, a comprehensive national database? And yeah, I think, Colin, you can attend to that as we wrap up.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think really good question from Joyce. First of all, I think you ask how are we going to ensure the involvement of Ugandans, not just utilization, but also in the development of local solutions. We are basically, as NITA, we are really trying to provide that enabling environment, not just for other players, but also actually for local players, local providers. And you could call them startups if you want for some of them. We are providing, for instance, using what we call the National ICT Initiative Support Program, or you've heard of NISP, with the Ministry of ICT and NITA. And basically, we are providing funding or seed capital to local players, or young people with great ideas, with which can change the service delivery for citizens. We're actually providing seed capital. We've also been able to reduce the fees for certification, and for many of these entry. It's been a barrier of entry for some startups. And we are also saying, to be sustainable, we really want to encourage the government policy around, buy Uganda, build Uganda. So in some instances, our first priority is actually to use local solution providers and not your typical multinational providers. Again, there are no licenses involved there. It's sustainable. It's built by our local people, and basically it creates jobs. So in that regard, Joyce, we're doing something about that. Of course, we have also provided more affordable internet services to business processing outfits, small startup organizations, and I mean I could name a couple of incentives that we're doing. We're not doing a lot of what we want to do yet, but we are on that journey right now, Joyce, to make sure that local players have a better environment to work in. But like you rightly said, there was, you've been seeing in the news the cash handouts, and NITA, we're actually involved in trying to help right now with this database. You're right. There is a challenge right now in making sure we've got a proper updated database, but we actually have UBOS, and UBOS is actually the mandated organization right now that literally would know household level who is vulnerable, who is who needs government support. But that's a very dynamic database. One day you think somebody's vulnerable with the last census, but then in the last 4 weeks people are vulnerable just because of the lockdown. So the vulnerable definition has been such a dynamic definition that we are literally racing behind it to catch up as government. So you raise very pertinent questions here, and we've had to work, for instance, in this last intervention very quickly, we've had to use town clerks and municipality business, or rather political leaders who know the business associations and can help them identify these vulnerable people. But the Ministry of Gender has now seen a need to populate a very well and dynamic database with UBOS to actually ensure we know who is vulnerable, but make sure we can track and keep updating that. So a bit of work to be done, Joyce. We're not perfect, we're not there yet, but we're on that journey right now. Thank you.
Thanks
and any ideas that can help us, would be appreciated. Over to you.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Colin. We are at the top of the hour. I just want to give 1 minute to Stella, who has a burning submission before we close this, and then I will give the platform to Chris to send us off while answering a question from Rehema. So Stella, 1 minute, and then we'll have Chris.
Hello, I wanted to just say something that through this system, improved market linkages through the partnerships and of the processors and exporters and the cooperatives. We've also improved access to information. Over 6,000 beneficiary farmers are accessing information on markets and input prices and good agronomy practices. Thank you. Hello?
Stella, yes, that's it. That's it from you?
Yes, yes.
Yes, yeah, it wasn't that clear because of connection, but that's fine. Chris, please, there's a question as you send us off or wrap up this session. There's a question from Rehema Baguma, where she says, and I think this was to UNCDF, might you also have looked at the extent to which the regulatory framework is supporting the digital transformation and gaps that need to be addressed, and how we might be addressing this at UNCDF with our partners? Over to you, Chris.
Indeed. Thank you so much for that question. And really many thanks to you all colleagues for your attendance and for staying with us through this session. Actually, a very important pillar of this program is working with policymakers to ensure an enabling policy and regulatory environment. So indeed, we try very much to engage with public sector to ensure that there are, that the laws in place are actually enabling to allow different actors to come in, to allow citizens to be involved, but also to ensure that it's conducive for new solutions, new services to come into play to address the challenges of certain communities being in danger of being left behind. There was also a question about, is there a framework that can be used to run, how do you build an inclusive digital economy? I think a question from our colleague in Zimbabwe. Indeed, let me point colleagues to a tool that has been developed by UNCDF in partnership with government and other stakeholders called the Inclusive Digital Economy Scorecard. Because as you try to achieve systemic change, as you try to build an inclusive digital economy, how do you know that you are on the right path? And so this tool, it's by no means perfect, but it allows a government to sort of look inwards at itself and measure what policies are in place, how is infrastructure, and sort of give itself a score. And then from that, set policy priorities, okay? What do we need to put in place to improve infrastructure? What do we need to put in place to improve digital literacy? There was a question on that as well. And so this is one tool, and there's several others that we have developed in order to allow others to take, not just use in Uganda, but actually take to other countries and use them as you sort of try to build that inclusive digital economy. And colleagues, as we took on this webinar, the idea was to really launch this report. And we hope that you will read it. A link was shared with you all, and please read it. If you have questions, reach out to us. But we hope that it will allow you all, as you take on your own interventions, to look at what our story was or what our journey was, what we learned, and what would you like to do differently? Can we collaborate? Because ultimately the idea here is to build these partnerships, is to catalyze other actors in the market to take up the mantle. So really want to thank you all for your time, for your engagement, for the lovely questions, and our speakers, and really everybody who had submissions, comments. We thank you all, and we look forward to hearing more from you. Please stay engaged. We are available on all the social media channels, and looking forward to continuing to work with you in leaving no one behind in the digital era. Thank you all so much.
Thanks, Chris, and really I'd like to thank our panelists, Stella, Pamela, Collins, and the colleagues from UNCDF. Thanks a lot for making the time to all the attendees. We had a very good turn up, and let's stay safe. And as we've enjoyed the dividends of digital, to be able to meet here on such a platform, work towards extending the same dividends to those that are not able to do that for now. I think that's a duty to all of us, and do it in a way that is inclusive and that is systemic in its impact. Thank you so much. Have a lovely day.